In Mafia 2, you play as Vito Scaletta. During his rambunctious youth, Vito is arrested for robbery and drafted into the military to fight Italy during World War II because he can speak Italia. After returning with an injury and finding his friend Joe has connections, Vito starts a life of crime to make something of himself. Mafia 2 is unapologetically a Grand Theft Auto clone. It's a mix of brawling, shooting, driving, and some unsavory activities. Stealing cars is a fundamental part of the game. In Mafia 2, there is a lock-picking minigame. Worse cars have easy-to-break locks, and higher-end cars have more difficult locks. Of course, if you don't really want to engage in the lock-picking, you can always just smash a window. Being set in the 1940s, all the cars control like boats. They're all slow to accelerate and have terrible turn radiuses. It's hard to fault it from a setting standpoint, but it would be nice if they took some liberties to the capabilities of the cars. This is made worse because the first 5 chapters take place in winter, where the snow exacerbates your already terrible handling. After chapter 5, there's a time skip and about 7 years pass. That means the quality of cars actually goes ahead about 7 years as well. Their speed and handling gets a dramatic increase, and it's no longer winter, so you don't have to deal with the snow. It also introduces some very fast sports cars. Unfortunately, the handling of the sports cars is absolutely terrible. You can customize and tune your cars in Mafia 2. Most of the upgrades you can get feel negligible or straight up detrimental. Upgrading the handling on the sports cars makes them feel like they're on ice. They skid and slide like crazy, and it feels worthless to pursue upgrading them because of that. Combat in Mafia 2 falls into 2 categories: fisticuffs and gunplay. Gunplay is exactly what it needed to be, and what you should be used to. It's a third-person cover shooter. Contrasting most cover shooters, enemies in Mafia 2 are actually quite fragile. They will commonly be killed in 2 to 3 hits. Mafia 2 also has forgiving hitboxes, and it seems like headshots are especially common. This makes the gunfights a lot more fun and exciting. Your arsenal isn't particularly diverse. You have some handguns, a shotgun, 2 different Tommy guns, and a handful of World War II gun variants for the categories. It's fun to spray a Tommy gun and mow down guys. It's definitely one of the things you want to do as a mobster in a Mafia game. You do have to rely on cover quite a bit throughout most of the game, but there are some great moments where you can go a little crazy. Melee brawling is really basic. You have a dodge button that can be held down to make you totally invulnerable. About a third of the way through, you unlock the counter punch. This basically makes losing any fist fights impossible. You hold down dodge and throw counters until you win. For story fist fights, you are required to do finishers, which is annoying. It just requires pressing a button combo, but enemies won't be beaten until you use a finisher on them. The police are another major factor in these kind of games. Mafia 2 introduces a system where you can be alerted to police. They'll send out your vehicle's license plate and your personal description. To become anonymous to them, you need to get a new car, change the plate, or change your outfit. This system is okay, it works, but it mostly feels like a way to bleed you for cash and force you to take detours rather than add a meaningful component to the gameplay. Mafia 2 is set in the 1940s and later the 1950s, so there is a very clear aesthetic. Despite being released in 2010, Mafia 2's graphics are still pleasing. They hold up well. The characters are all unique looking and very detailed. The music is period appropriate, so you'll either love it or hate it. Some of it is quite catchy.
The army now, a blowing reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. They made him blow a bugle for his Uncle Sam.
There is something oddly satisfying about listening to 1940s music while being chased by cops.
Copy that.
So sing and make us rhyme. Guarantee you one real good fine time. Drink rum and Coca-Cola.
The story is exactly what you'd expect, and really what you want in a Mafia game. Vito starts off being a petty thief, stealing cars, then he progresses to assault, intimidation, and murder, and eventually he's inducted into the crime family. After he joins up, there's an internal power struggle within the organization with Vito stuck in the middle of it. It's serious, but it has a good balance of campy and funny moments to provide levity.
What the hell is that smell then?
Oh, yeah, I'm smelling it too.
Must be Frankie Potts.
Come on, that asshole puked in your car?
Ah, nice in a truck.
What?
What?
Hey, it's all your fault, Joey. I told you I had some fucking business to take care of, and you went and got me drunk.
A lot of this comes from Joe. Joe accompanies you for the majority of the missions in Mafia 2. If Joe wasn't as good of a character as he is, Mafia 2 would be a significantly worse experience. There are a lot of characters in Mafia 2, and most of them are sidelined quickly. You'll do a job or meet someone new like Giuseppe or Derek at the docks, then basically never see them again. Then they'll pop up during the last 2 missions just as a reminder of where you've been. The finale largely feels like a rushed hack job to have some kind of closure to the story. Mafia 2 is at its best with Vito and Joe's camaraderie being gangsters on the rise, and it feels kind of lackluster when it tries to be more grandiose than that. Mafia 2 isn't overly difficult, but it does have some really frustrating aspects. Checkpoints are very far apart. Chapters are long, and they're broken down into a string of components. Once you complete a part, you aren't necessarily given a checkpoint, even when it really feels like you should get one. This means if you die or otherwise fail, you can have to repeat some long driving or shooting sections, which gets discouraging really quickly. Some of these shooting sections are very long, and there are elements of trial and error. Some enemy spawns will just catch you off guard. This applies to cover not always working, and the rare hand grenade coming from out of the blue and instantly killing you. Largely being without checkpoints, it means you have to play these sections near perfectly to progress. You do have regenerating health, but it can feel like it doesn't regenerate fast enough a lot of the time. It occasionally feels like you'll get killed unfairly, which does leave a bitter taste in your mouth in conjunction with the implementation of checkpoints. The police in Mafia 2 feel incredibly inconsistent. You can ram into a cop car at high speed and have no penalty, or you can slightly graze another car in traffic and get the cops onto you. This applies to speeding. Sometimes you'll get tickets and sometimes you won't. The length of games in this genre can get inflated because it's really easy to get distracted.
Size.
No, come on, have a heart.
I'm going in.
Spending a good chunk of time getting distracted, Mafia 2 was completed in 10 hours, 49 minutes, and 33 seconds. Driving is a fundamental part of these games. Regrettably, most of it in Mafia 2 is just commuting from A to B. As previously stated, the cars are slow, and you're strongly suggested to drive the speed limit to avoid tickets and police chases. There are very few sections that require precision driving because of the clunky handling of most of the cars. This is unfortunate because some of the most interesting and intense parts of Mafia 2 are during the few chase sequences that exist. The other issue with the pacing is that checkpoints are infrequent. This can lead to a lot of repeating the same segments simply because the checkpoints are far away. Despite the low number of checkpoints, when you do get a checkpoint, it's often in an inconvenient place. They're frequently before cutscenes or phone calls or some other section which can be unskippable. This just adds another layer of annoyance and time wasting as you have to watch the same cutscenes again if you fail. And if you fail once, you're probably going to fail at least a second or third time. Mafia 2 is totally linear, with little room to deviate, so it's worth noting if you're more familiar with the Grand Theft Autos as they're a little bit more open-ended. Most of the missions are repetitive. The set pieces are fun, but there is an obvious formula present. Vito wakes up, answers the phone, he gets dressed, drives somewhere to meet someone, drives to the next location, you do your thing, usually resulting in a gun battle, get in a car, lose the cops, drop off Joe, and go to wherever Vito is currently staying and end the day. It ends up being pretty monotonous and predictable. The final stretch requires you to gather a minimum amount of money to proceed. The only way to get it is to steal cars or rob stores. Regardless of your frugality throughout the game, large sums of money are simply stripped from you at various points, basically forcing you to go and steal a bunch of cars to pay off a mandatory debt before the final missions. This is nothing but padding. They could easily have given you enough cash from the missions you complete during this time, but instead force you to grind some cash out. It's not a lot of padding, as you can complete it in 15 to 20 minutes, but the fact that it's there leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. Mafia 2's story has great pacing. The intro takes place in a battle in World War II, then it goes into the fairly standard aspect of returning home and getting re-established. Once you're just on the cusp of making it, Mafia 2 throws a curveball at you. Then you're kinda back to square one afterwards, but it doesn't feel bad. Every part of Mafia 2 feels important. Looking at parts of the story individually, you could probably cut some out, but they all come together and work to make a good structured story and game. Despite being a carbon copy of Grand Theft Auto, Mafia 2 manages to stand on its own. The shooting is competent, and its forgiving hitboxes and fragile enemies make it fun for a cover shooter that lets you feel like a 1940s mobster. The cars feel too slow and handle like boats, which makes driving unpleasant. That's unfortunate because there is tons of driving in Mafia 2 and there is no way to bypass it through things like taxis or fast travel. It has too few checkpoints, which makes failing a mission or dying much more punishing than necessary and does hamper your enjoyment a little bit. Repeating the same sections and being forced to sit through cutscenes because of bad checkpoint placement is not really fun. A lot of the systems and things like gun stores and gas stations are largely obsolete and can be completely avoided as Mafia 2 is very linear. Joe and Vito's chemistry is excellent and really carries the story. But when Mafia 2 tries to tell a bigger story, it kinda gets lost in itself. Mafia 2 is a good experience, worthy of your time. Mafia 2 gets recommended playing's most prestigious verdict of recommended.
You guys did a hell of a job. Not too many guys got the stomach for this line of work. So now, I'm wondering if yous are ready to take the next step.
Yeah, sure. What next step?
I'm talking about taking somebody out. Just 'cause someone points his finger at him and tells you to do it.
And 4. Suspect is about 6 feet.